Hey guys, Roopops here. I decided today that I wanted to do something a little bit different. I was sat in my room and I was thinking about just stuff in general, I guess. And I thought maybe I'd like to kind of talk to you guys about something you may have noticed in videos. Maybe you haven't, I don't know. But I wanted to talk about why I have a beard. And maybe you're thinking, oh, I didn't actually notice until you pointed it out. Or maybe you've noticed it and wondered, am I watching a dude or a chick? And I'd kind of like to talk about it a little bit, which is something I haven't done on YouTube before, so it's a little daunting, but we'll kind of get into it. So I kind of need to provide a little bit of a backstory for you to build up to what it is and that sort of thing. So when I was at school, I was kind of severely bullied. Never to the point of like physical confrontation or anything like that. It was more verbal, and mostly it was girls who were doing the bullying. I still remember it like to this day. I was 15, 16 at the time, and I'm 31 this year, and those memories never really go away. But so yeah, I was being bullied at school, and it was for something that I'd never really noticed until this particular bit of the bullying started. I was being bullied for having a beard, and I hadn't really noticed that I had it. It's sort of like that thing where you don't really notice you have something until someone points it out, like spinach in your teeth or something like that. And so it was pretty bad, and I didn't know why I had it, and at the time I didn't really have anywhere to turn to. Like the internet was pretty new at that point, so I didn't realise that I could sort of go on and have a look. And I'd also had another issue at that point, which was my menses wasn't regular. At that point I'd gone up to a year without having a period, and to my mum that seemed a little strange. So we sort of gathered at the computer that day and typed in the two symptoms and we had a Wikipedia page pop up, which was really the only form of information we had at the time. So we sort of read through it and stuff, and we're like, oh, okay. And the page that popped up was a condition called PCOS. And so we printed off the pages and stuff and took them to the doctor. And we said, you know, this is what we think she has. That's what my mum said to the doctor. And so the doctor was like, okay, well, we'll send her for tests and we'll see what the outcome is. So yeah, I got sent up to the hospital and I got poked with needles, and I had to do the whole fasting thing for 12 hours, which really sucked. All I could have was water. And at that point I was like kind of a hungry teenager, so that was really sucky. That was horrible. So my mum took me to the hospital and I had my tests done. They sat me in this horrible clinical white hallway, and I waited to be called up to be stabbed with a needle, which I hate. I have a massive phobia of needles, so I wasn't particularly thrilled at the idea of having to have it done twice in one day. So they called me in, and the woman told me, you know, we can just take your blood and blah 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 blah, which I hated, and I cried. I won't lie, I did cry. My mum was there holding my hand, and I kind of crushed it, where I squeezed her so hard. with a needle and in my arm. I feel so bad for her because my mum's only a dainty little thing, and I nearly crushed her hand. So the women took my blood and stuff, and then they made me drink this massive bottle of Lucozade, which from that point till now I have never touched again. The memory of it is just so ingrained. I can't bring myself to even look at it. Every time I see a bottle of Lucozade, I'm like, so then after drinking the giant bottle of nastiness, they sat me in a hallway for 2 hours, and I wasn't allowed to do anything. I couldn't go outside or anything like that, just in case I passed out, which up until that point in my life I never had done. So I just sat bored in a hallway for 2 hours until they called me to have the needle done again. Only the second time it was a student nurse doing it, and he wasn't the most experienced in people skills, so he thought it'd be funny to tell me that they couldn't find the vein and that he'd have to call his supervisor in, and I was in absolute hysterics at this point. Tears were streaming down my face, I was crying, and I looked over to my left and saw on the table with all the tools and things 3 vials of my blood. Suffice to say, I was less than impressed. So my mum said to him, can you let her hit you? And he was like, yeah, alright. So I sort of tapped him because I was holding a cotton swab on my arm, and he said, no, do it harder than that. So I pushed the cotton swab on my arm, closed my arm, and then hit him with my other hand, and I hit him so hard it echoed down the hallway. According to my mum, he flinched, which was at that time was a rather big victory for me because I'd gotten revenge on the person who'd made me very upset. But the tests came back from that, and it was confirmed that I had PCOS. And then we would talk to you about medications and stuff, and I was put on this horrible medication called metformin, which is usually prescribed for people who have got diabetes. And the reason that I was prescribed it is because in PCOS you have elevated insulin levels. So where your body would normally have the correct amount of insulin to break down your food and absorb all the things it needs to absorb, in PCOS the insulin is faulty, so it doesn't work as well, and as a result of that the pancreas then makes more insulin, which can lead to weight gain, which is fantastic. And so you can imagine being 16 years old, not just hairy but chubby as well. So that just added to the list of fun things that I had to deal with at the tender age of 16. But yeah, that medication made me really sick, and so I think about a year after I started taking it, I came off it because I couldn't deal with the awful side effects of that drug. One of which was really bad diarrhea. Sorry for being frank, but that's what this video is all about. So yeah, that was horrible, and I decided to stop taking it. And coming off it was worse than taking it. There was a day where I had such bad pains in my stomach and my abdomen that my mum and I ended up in the walk-in centre at the hospital. They did all the tests and things, and it was basically concluded that it was because I was coming off the meds and my body was readapting to not having taken it. So I just had to tough it out until the drug had left my body completely. From that point, I kind of became a recluse. I was in denial about the condition. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. I couldn't accept that I was going to be different, that I was going to look different, and that that I would have to deal with a lifetime of having hair on my face. So I hid away from the world. I locked myself in my room. I didn't work. I didn't socialise. I just sat in my room all day and just hid. And I was there in that mental state for 5 years. I think maybe I was headed towards depression, which is a lovely side effect of PCOS. You're more prone to getting depression, which is lovely. And yeah, so after that, I didn't really know what to do. I decided to do a little bit of research, because at that point I was 21 and rather large lady. I was 21 and I was 21 stone at that point. I'd been that weight for about 2 years, so that was the heaviest I'd ever been. So I was at the very bottom of the emotional well. I had no further to go. I was sad and I was lonely and I was in denial, and I just couldn't accept that all these things were happening to me. And you know, I saw other people my age who were, you know, thin and happy and socializing and that sort of stuff, and I felt so distant. It was like I sort of didn't really belong around people, so that's why I locked myself away. I still remember sort of sitting in my room and just watching TV or drawing or reading or listening to really, really depressing music, and it was a tough time. But that was a little further than I intended to go in the story. After that, I found the courage to go out and sign on to job seekers, because you know, we needed money and my mum was desperately trying to get me to go out of the house and to live my life instead of wasting it in my bedroom. So I decided that I was going to try and work on my confidence in being out in the world. So what I did was I signed up to be a volunteer in a charity shop. And at first I spent my time in the shop out the back where no one could see me. I was doing everything I could to avoid going on the till and being out in the public eye. I was sorting donations and that sort of thing. But then the manager there said to me one day, you know, you need to go on the till because there's no one else that can go out there today. So I sort of took a deep breath and swallowed my anxiety and went out and sat on the till. And that began a upward turning point for me. I was there for 2.5 years on and off, between jobs and that sort of thing. Like when I lost a job, I'd go back and continue working there until I found another one. And I got my first job in a customer facing role. I believe it was working in a shop in an airport, and that was a terrible job. I didn't enjoy it because lots of other things started happening around that point, but that's for another video. After that one, I went to work behind a bar in an arcade, which I really loved. I really loved that job, and it really helped me bring me out of my shell. I became more confident, and because I had to talk to people on a daily basis, so I got myself in a mindset where I pretended I was confident in situations that made me nervous. So I sort of faked being confident, and I put on this sort of facade of being confident and that sort of thing. But when you do that, you discover that you actually start to believe that confidence, so you become a confident person. And I was at that job for 2 years, and then I decided to leave because I wasn't happy there anymore. And the job I went to after that was working in a cinema, which is what I'm still doing now. and like going from the bar to the cinema, my confidence is just like spiraled up out of control. I'm a much more confident person than I was all those years ago, and I really enjoy the interactions with the customers. I mean, I've had a few people, when I worked at the bar, I had a few guys who were drunk and they were like, oh, are you a man or a woman, and that sort of thing. I mean, you learn how to sort of just shrug it off, because people, when they're drunk, they do stupid stuff. But no, I remember when I was working in the bar, I had a little boy and his friend come up to the bar to buy a drink. Obviously it was just like juice or a slush puppy or something. And I remember the little boy asking me, is that a beard? And I looked at him and I was like, yes, it is. Oh, was his response. And at that point I had developed a very simple explanation to help a child understand why I had it. So I turned to him and I said, I've got a sickness that makes it grow, which is really the simplest explanation you can give a child of his age. He was about 7 or 8, I think. Especially when children haven't been sort of exposed to the world of people who are different, for whether it's one medical reason or another, or an accident or something like that. The general spectrum of people who are different. There are a lot of people in the world who haven't been exposed to that, so they're not quite sure how to explain it to their children, I guess. But I said that to him and he looked up at me and he was like, "Aw, well, I hope you get better soon." And that just warmed my heart that he cared that much about a stranger to say something so nice. But I generally try and pass on this information to other people so they understand more about me, and they understand that even though the hair is there, it doesn't change who I am. It doesn't make me a worse person or a weird person. I mean, I'm weird, I know I'm weird, but and I'm very proud to be weird. I don't want to be normal. Normal people are boring. Sorry to any of you normal people out there, by the way. But then again, what's normal? But you know, that's another debate to get into in another day. But yeah, so I like to try and explain to people why I have it and that sort of thing. And any opportunity I get to raise awareness, I always take it. Yeah, having PCOS can really suck. There's a lot of downsides to it, and a lot of the things. I mean, the statistic for women who have got PCOS is 1 in 10, and that's huge. So like every 1 in 10 women you see has PCOS in some form or another, whether it's more external like mine, or more internal. You just don't know, because it's an invisible illness. You can't see it. All you can see is the physical side effects of it. Sometimes you can see them. With me, it's very evident. I mean, that's the statistic is 1 in 10 women of childbearing age, or the other one is premenopausal women as well. It can be referred to in either way. It just depends where you read about it, I guess. Some other symptoms that there are, other than the hair. I mean, the hair isn't just on the face, it's on the body as well, and it's referred to as excessive hair growth, or hirsutism. You can look up that on Wikipedia. It's got loads of explanations about the condition and that sort of thing. There are other symptoms. You've got irregular periods, weight gain, thinning hair or hair loss, and oily skin or acne. Aside from the thinning hair or hair loss, I suffer with all those other things. Some of the other conditions, you can get endometriosis, which is a horrible, horrible condition. I have a friend who had that, and it was horrible. And you have fertility issues as well, so it's really hard to try and have children. And that's a really sucky part for me. I've been trying to have children since I was 18 years old, and I currently only have one angel baby. I got pregnant in 2016, and I was ecstatic. I was so happy, and I had been trying for so many years to have a child, and then finally I was holding that test in my hand and it was positive, and I was elated. I couldn't believe how lucky I was, and I still remember the day that I took the test. I went and took the test and sat in my mum's room with it face down, and I was watching my watch for the time to turn the test over, and when the time reached for me to turn it, I couldn't do it. I was sort of frozen. Eventually I did turn the test, and I saw there was a bright blue cross on the test, and I just sat there in complete silence, and I heard my mum, she was like, "You're pregnant, aren't you?" I sort of looked at her and nodded, and then she screamed and hugged me, and then my brother was there too, and he hugged me as well. So that day I made an appointment to go to the doctors and have the test sort of confirmed, which was like, I think two weeks from the point where I phoned them, which is a really long time to wait for a doctor's appointment. But I think it was about a week later, I was at work, which is when I was still working behind the bar, and we had a customer come in who had a crate of beer for some reason, and we stored it out the back of the bar for him. At the end of the night he came to collect the box, and I was bringing it out to him, and I caught a corner awkwardly while I was carrying the box, and it jabbed me in the belly. I didn't think much of it at the time, but about an hour later I started bleeding, and I went to my manager and I said to her about it, and she sent me home. I phoned the out of hours doctors to get an emergency appointment, and my boyfriend at the time, we drove up to the clinic that was open for the appointment, and we went in to see the doctor, and she just looked at me and said, "If it's a miscarriage, there's nothing we can do about it." My heart sank, and so we sort of drove home quite silent, hoping that things would improve. The following few days the bleeding got worse, and so I went to the emergency pregnancy unit at a local hospital. A friend of mine from work drove me up there, and I had a blood test done, and it confirmed that I was in fact pregnant. They took me in for an ultrasound scan, and there was nothing on the scan screen. Nothing. And I didn't quite know how to react. I sort of left there. I waited a few days to see if the bleeding would stop, and it didn't. I got written off work for a week, and by the time I came back the bleeding had stopped, and I had taken another test and it was negative. I'd lost my baby, and that was 2 years ago. And recently it was her second anniversary, and we did a balloon release for her. It's heartbreaking, especially when you've been trying for years and years and years to try and have your first child, and you get to experience it for a short amount of time, and then it gets brutally ripped away from you. It's heartbreaking. And there are some other hard points of it as well. Is I was 7 weeks when I lost my child, and it can get really tough when you want to talk about it. You want to acknowledge that your baby was a person, but there's such stigma around miscarriage that a lot of people will just shrug it off and say, oh well, it could have been worse, or oh, you can try again. But it doesn't make it any easier. After I lost the baby, my boyfriend at the time made a really sweet gesture. He took me to Build-A-Bear, and we decided to make a bear in memory of our child. We named her Hope Angel, because hope is what she gave us, and an angel is what she is. And you may have seen the bear in the background of some of my videos. She's right here. And I'm not gonna hide it, I do sleep with her every night, because it's the only way I can be close to her. And the sad thing is, I don't even have a scan picture. I have nothing, no pictures, and that's one of the hardest parts, is not having any real, it sounds horrible, but not having any real physical proof that your child existed other than the memories and the pregnancy test. And it's really hard. Like PCOS, you're at a higher risk of miscarriage because of all the hormones and stuff that are so out of balance in your body. And I lost my child. Like the 26th of March was her birthday. I didn't really know what day she was going to be born on. I just sort of knew she was going to be a March baby because I counted the weeks and stuff. And I gave her a very special birthday because it's also the birthday of my granddad. And because I suffer with memory issues, which is another thing which is tied to the PCOS. So giving her a birthday that I'll easily remember helps me to not forget. I mean, I could never forget her. You know, she was my little miracle. And but having a specific birthday helps me remember, so then I can do things to celebrate her life. But it's really hard having problems conceiving. I mean, my mum had tried 10 years to have me, and it's so tough. I mean, my grandmother tried 10 years to have her first child too, and I hoped that I was going to break the 10-year curse on my family, but I guess I kind of did. But hopefully, you know, one day there'll be a little Roopop running around. Anyway, so yeah, problems conceiving is another issue with PCOS. It's the hormones, the extra androgens in your system. They throw your body out of whack, and because what it is with PCOS is you have cysts on your ovaries. So each month when you're supposed to ovulate or have a period, your ovary will develop a cyst and a little fluid-filled sac, and it will release the egg into your system. When you've got PCOS, the cysts build up and the eggs don't release. So that cystic build-up makes your body create more testosterone and more androgens, which results in the hirsutism and the other health issues. PCOS is one of the most common forms of one of the most common causes of infertility. So with the irregular periods, that leads to the problems with fertility and the difficulty having children. And PCOS can also create risks in later life too. People who have got PCOS are at risk of developing type 2 diabetes, depression, high blood pressure and high cholesterol, which can lead to heart disease and strokes, and sleep apnea. So that is issues with sleeping. I mean, when you're asleep, your system will sort of interrupt your sleep and wake you up, so you don't get a full night's sleep. And we all know that that's bad for your health too. And women who have less than 3 or 4 periods a year are higher than average risk of developing endometrial cancer, which is cancer of the womb lining. The chance of developing it is small, and it can be minimised using treatments to regulate periods, such as birth control and other medications. I'm not the most versed in the medications for it, but there's plenty of them that can be prescribed to help with the symptoms. And there's other that you can go down the natural route as well. And for a little while I was treating my high insulin levels with cinnamon. So taking a teaspoon in a drink once a day, it makes your insulin more sensitive. So your body needs to produce less and it can break down your food correctly. I was treating my excess testosterone levels with spearmint tea, and so I read about that online and I gave it a try, and it worked. It was making the growth less. As I've gotten older, the growth is less now as well. I mean, people always ask me, oh, why don't you have laser treatment, or why don't you wax it? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to put myself through an amazing amount of pain just to, make it easier for people to look at me. I mean, I'm very much like most of the guys who may see this. I've shaved my face, dudes. Shaving foam razor once every 2 weeks. I can't do it any more than that because my face would be really, really sore. And I only do that so that my face doesn't itch. Because it's so itchy when it's growing out. So itchy. So it can be a pain in the backside having PCOS. But, we're not alone. I mean, there are celebrities who have it too. And I only know of 4 at the moment. If you know of any more, drop them down in the comments. But you've got, Victoria Beckham, Emma Thompson, Jules Oliver and Daisy Ridley. And she's the chick from Star Wars. And I love Emma Thompson. She's one of my favourite actresses. And it wasn't until a little while ago that I found out she actually had it. I had no idea. And, you wouldn't, because I guess most of the girls don't really suffer with the external issues for it. And, being in Hollywood, you've got personal trainers and stuff, so their sort of fitness levels are above average and they don't have to really deal with being chubby. But, so that's the reason why you sometimes see me with either a shadow or very noticeable hair on my face, is because I've got PCOS. And it can be a tough condition, but you have to get yourself into the mindset of not caring what people think. I mean, it's human nature to stare at things that we don't understand or that we don't see very often. And accepting that is kind of step 1 of keeping yourself away from locking yourself in your room every day and hiding from the world. And it took me a long time to get to that point. I battled for years with being a recluse and hiding away. And one day I woke up and I was like, what am I doing? So I got into the mindset of people are going to stare, you can't stop it. what you can do is raise awareness by telling people. And that's what I do every opportunity that I get. I try and make people aware of it. So then if they see another person with it, they'll know that there's a condition there. And it just makes life easier for the person who's suffering with it, because if we can get people to the point where differences are the everyday norm, they're accepted and they're made known, then the world would be a so much better place to live in if you've got some form of difference, that society, something that society deems different. That would make life so much easier. Anyway, I'm gonna leave this video here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next gaming video. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Bye.